Hi, in today's lecture, we will look into the implements used for secondary tillage. So, what is secondary tillage? Secondary tillage is the operation following primary tillage. It is done to perform, it is done to create a proper soil tilt for seeding and planting. So, these are more lighter and finer operations when compared to primary tillage activities. So there are different implements used for doing secondary tillage in the field. So they can be either tractor drawn or animal drawn. So we will be looking into the different implements in detail in the coming slides. So Harrow. Harrow is the most commonly used secondary tillage implement. So it cuts only uh, soil to a shallow depth, and it is used for creating a smooth or a fine tilt in the field. It also helps to cut the weeds and mix any other materials in the soil such as fertilizers, manures, etc. So there are different types of harrows used in India. So some of the most commonly used indigenous type of harrows are discussed in the coming slides. So a harrow is used for cutting the soil. It's used for removing the stubble of the previous crop. It's used for pulverizing the soil. It is also used for preparing the seed bed before we start cultivating or before we start the main field activities, and then it is also used for preparing the main field if we are transplanting the seedlings from the nursery bed. So the first type of harrow which we will be looking into is a disc harrow. So here we can see there are two pictures of a harrow. So the first picture on the left top corner shows a smooth disc type of a harrow and a serrated edged disc harrow. And to the rightmost bottom, in the bottommost on the rightmost corner, you can see the type of disc harrow where the discs are actually smooth edged. So disc harrow is the most commonly used type of a harrow in India, and they can either be animal drawn or tractor drawn. So they have a number of rotating shafts attached, rotating discs attached to a common shaft, and they are used for pulverizing the soil, and the discs rotate when they move in the field. So there are different types of disc harrows. They can be either single action or double action or offset type of disc harrow. So the single action type of disc harrow is the harrow where there are two sets of harrows or gangs. So a gang is nothing but a central a number of discs which are connected to a single axis. So that is called as a gang. So in a single action type of a disc harrow, you can see there are two sets of gangs, and they are actually uh, they are placed opposite to each other, and they cut and they pulverize the soil on opposite sides. So in a double action type of a harrow, you can see that there are two sets of gang in the opposite direction, one in the front and one in the back, and they are and the harrows, the front and the back are also opposite to each other. So here in double action type of disc harrow, you can see that the entire field will be worked up twice for every trip the tractor or the animal pulls the harrow. The third type of a disc harrow is the offset type of a disc harrow. So in an offset type of disc harrow, you have two sets of gang, one behind the other. Uh, Unlike the single action or the double action type of a harrow. So here you can see that the harrow in the front and harrow at the back both are in opposite directions. So they cut and they uplift and they throw the soil on the opposite sides. So the parts of a disc harrow. Some of the most commonly identified parts in a disc harrow is the disc, the gang or the gang bolt, the gang bolt, and the spool or the spacer, the bearings, transport wheel, the scraper, and the weight box. So the disc. So the disc is generally concave in shape, and it cuts and inverts the soil. And the concave discs are of diameter between 35 to 70 centimeter, and they can either be plain disc or cutaway disc. Cutaway discs are nothing but serrated discs. So serrated discs or cutaway discs generally used when we need to remove the when we need to remove stubble or grass or weeds from the previous crop, or if the land has been left fallow. In that case, if we want to remove the weeds from the field after primary tillage, we can use a serrated type of a disc harrow. A gang is nothing but a set of discs mounted on a common shaft called as a is called as a gang bolt. So a gang bolt is the bolt which is used for connecting the uh, shaft, the central shaft to the pulling device, pulling the tractor or the animal, whichever. So that is called as a gang bolt. And then, so here also we can see the parts. So this is the shaft to which the discs are connected. So this is called as a gang. So here in this picture, we can see there are four sets of gangs, and the discs are concave in nature. So here we can see the axis, or the central axis is actually connected to the frame using the gang bolt. And the next part is the spool or the spacer. The spool or spacer is the space between two discs. It's actually a cylindrical tube connecting two discs. So every time before we start using the disc harrow in the field, we can check for the spool spacing in order to achieve the required depth of tillage. And then we have the bearings, we have the transport wheel. The transport wheels are used for transporting the harrow on roads without causing any damage to the discs. And then we have the scraper and the weight box. So scraper is a component inside the concave side of the disc. It is used for removing the soil which is stuck to the disc during operation. So this generally happens when the soil is very wet, or if the soil has more clay content. And then the weight box, a weight box is nothing but space provided where you can add weights to the harrow for achieving the required depth of penetration. This can be done by artificially including weights or a weight box, or it can also be done by it can be done manually by the person who is driving the animal which pulls the disc harrow. The person itself can stand on the harrow, and that acts as a weight during operation. So here there are some more parts marked, and so here this is a gang wrench. This gang wrench is used for tightening the gang bolts, and we can make sure that all the discs are connected firmly to the central axis or the central shaft. And then this is the gang bolt nut. This is for connecting the individual discs to the central axis. So this is the spool, or the spacing between two discs. So adjustments for obtaining a higher penetration. So we can increase the gang angle, we can add weights, we can lower the hitch point, we can use sharp edge discs of smaller diameter and lesser concavity, and we can also regulate the speed. When we operate the implement at a lower speed, the penetration is better when compared with the implement running at higher speeds. So there are different other indigenous types of harrows and other types of harrows apart from the disc harrow. So we have the spike tooth harrow. So here we can see that there are sharp spikes or tooth attached to the frame. So this is used for secondary tillage operations. And then we have the spring tooth harrow. The spring tooth harrow is a harrow where we have spikes, and here the most peculiar feature is that there are springs attached to the frame. These spikes are also called as tines, and so these tines are in turn attached to springs. Now these springs are used for shock absorption. So when in case the tines or these tooth, when they come in contact with a hard a stone or a stubble, they don't break easily. They will adjust, and the spring will compress, and it will prevent breakage of the tines or the spring or the tooth. The next one is the Acme Harrow. Acme Harrow is a type of a harrow where there are small knife kind of attachments attached to the frame, and these are also called as a blade harrow or the knife tooth harrow or the pulverizer, and this is also used for secondary tillage activities. The next one is the patela. Patela is an indigenous type of, of a harrow commonly found in the northern part of the Indian subcontinent, and it is actually a wooden plank used for smoothing the soil. And behind the wooden plank, as you can see in the picture, there are hooks attached. Now these hooks are used for removing the weeds in the field. Next one is the triangular harrow. So triangular harrow is also similar to a spike tooth harrow, except that it has a triangular frame, and the tooth in the triangular harrow are fixed and they're not adjustable. So there are chances that it might break when it comes in contact with a hard soil particle or a stone or etc. The next one is a blade harrow. A blade harrow is generally used for leveling the soil. So there are different types of harrows. They can either be blade harrows, they can either be animal drawn or tractor drawn. So to the left you can see the animal drawn type of blade harrow, and to the right you can see the tractor drawn type of blade harrow. Now the blade harrow can also be used for land leveling purposes. So the last one is a power harrow. The power harrow is completely different from the previous harrows which we saw. So a power harrow is a harrow which uses power or energy from the tractor through the power takeoff shaft, and this energy which is applied to the harrow helps to, the blades or um, the tooth to move. So here in a power harrow, you have these blades which are actually attached to two shafts. So a shaft in the front and there's a shaft at the back to which there are a number of blades attached, and the blades are actually arranged in a staggered fashion so that there is no so that all the area is covered when the implement is run in the field in one single stretch. And these blades, they move in a reciprocating way, so the power is supplied to the blades from the power takeoff shaft from the tractor, and this power helps the blades to move in a reciprocating way, and this helps to carry out the secondary tillage operations in the field. So these are some of the secondary tillage implements used in the field. So we saw about harrow, the different types of indigenous harrows, the animal drawn type of harrows, and tractor drawn type of harrows used in India. Thank you.